Okay, let's get started on how to paint rocks in a stream. I most often start a painting on a colored ground such as magenta, and once that paint is dry, I put on third marks and also have the third marks on my reference as well. I decided to use white chalk to do the drawing on this quinacridone magenta background. My goal is to block in the big shapes as simply as I can and just give myself enough information for placing paint later on. While I'm drawing, I'm considering how I can make nice overlapping shapes to create depth. I'm also trying to vary the size of the shapes that I'm making and the intervals between the items. I'm also aware of the angles of the shapes that I'm drawing, and I'm also looking at the negative spaces around the rocks. By looking at the negative space, it makes it much easier to draw the positive form. Before starting a new painting, I like to clean out my palette and set up my colors and organize them so it's easier for me to paint as I go along. Here's my palette with the colors listed. Also at the end of this video you can see a supply list. I use both a palette knife and a brush to paint. I like what the palette knives do in terms of scratchy marks and having a little less control than with the paintbrush. The first thing I'm doing here is blocking in the darks that I want, and I'm careful not to go completely black in terms of shade on these colors and not too opaque either. When doing a painting in this style, be aware of letting your wrist move in a lot of different directions to create interesting marks. Hold your paintbrush or palette knife loosely as well, and allow those marks to go on fluidly. I do a lot more looking than painting when I'm doing this stage. I look very carefully at my reference and decide where those dark marks are going to go. I'm also not a slave to my photograph. If I feel like a rock needs to move or to change shape, I will do that. This was one of those rare photographs when I did my pre-work in Photoshop where very few things needed to be moved or adjusted. And as you can see, the colors I chose to paint with are quite different from the photograph. I could have copied the colors I saw in the photo, and that would have worked as well. But for this piece, I was doing it for a commission, and there was particular colors that they were hoping for. And having said that, I really enjoy working with playful color and choosing color schemes. When you're blocking in the water areas, make some horizontal marks and also some vertical marks through those horizontals. That helps to make the water look more reflective and shiny. Here I'm continuing to block in using the magenta and the purple colors to do all the darks, and once I'm happy with that, I'm going to move on to figure out the colors for the rocks. Here I decided to try a few different sets of colors for the rocks on just one rock before moving on to all of them. Following are a few sets of blues and greens and glazes that I gave a go, and I also tried some violets and things, and I just realized that I needed a little bit more warmth in my ground color before moving on to the rocks. So I decided to use titanium white and white out these rocks and then start again. So I put the titanium white on, added the magenta color over top again, and when that was dry I took pyrrole orange and put some of this color in various spots of the painting, not covering up all the pink and allowing that change of color between the warm and the cool. As a mother color, I used yellow oxide and added it to the chromium oxide green, which is a duller green, and also into the brighter green of permanent green light, and into the dioxazine purple. Also into all those three colors I added white for tinting. I decided to begin with the permanent green light, which is the brighter green. I scratched into the wet paint using my catalyst tool to make some interesting marks. I plan to glaze this green later on with some nickel azo yellow. There was very little bright green to place, so now I'm placing the chromium oxide green with the yellow ochre and white mixture. And every once in a while when I need to, I add a little bit more white into that color just to lighten it a bit more. I continue to be careful not to cover all the magenta layer or the purple layer as I place these marks, and I'm going to continue to use my Catalyst silicone shaper to create some more scratchy marks inside the paint. I'm glad to have the pre-mixed greens in the mid-tone. To this mid-tone I can always add more white. This pre-mixed paint allows me to get more into the flow with my painting. Simplifying the color scheme on this piece is really making it a lot easier to make decisions as I go along. My main concerns as I do this section of the painting is to make sure that my colors are the right shade and also the right brilliance. Working with a group of complex shapes, it's handy to put your finger approximately where you want to be working onto your painting, then look at your reference and then go back to where you've pointed. That way you don't get lost within all the shapes. Once a majority of the greens have been placed and blocked in, I now want to put a lighter value into my painting, which is going to be the tinted yellow ochre near the top of the painting. I continue to look to areas where I need to add this lighter hue. Hey Hugh, how you doing? For the next set of midtones, I'm going to use the dioxazine purple with the yellow oxide and white and look for all the areas where I want to place this color. To help establish placement, I'm also going back and forth with some of the other colors, such as the yellow oxide. When painting the branches that are coming off of the left side, I'm using vertical marks within the horizontal curve. This creates a little bit more form within that shape and also broken color with the magenta and the violet. I felt like I need to place some of the whitest whites that will happen in this painting so that I could move on to the other shades. I make sure to paint the water in the direction that it's flowing, or if it's on flat areas I go horizontally, and then place some of those vertical marks to make the water look shiny. Okay, I want to get back to those mid-tone violets and place some of the water and rocks in the foreground. I love the effects of broken color by allowing the little bits of that magenta background to show through, as well as the orange glazes that were placed on top. On top of the dark areas of water where I placed purple, I then took quinacridone magenta and the permanent green light and mixed a dark green and placed it on top of those dark areas. I'm looking for areas that I need to darken using the dioxazine purple. I'm at the stage where I think I need to take some white chalk and draw in the changes I need to make or additions that need to be made. By adding a hint of an outline on the top of the lower rocks, it helps to create some form. Here we're adding the rippling water where the light is catching. While that paint was still wet, I added a lot more medium to my palette knife and pulled some of the paint along just to create a more of a transition edge into the other colors. At this stage, I stop a lot and look at my reference. I look at my painting, decide what mark I'm going to put on and put it on. This takes me a long time of looking and way less painting. This way I can keep the spontaneity of the piece happening and also not to overwork. Here the water looks too light to me, so I added a glaze of magenta. While I had that magenta glaze, I decided to add a little bit to the bright top part of the painting just to push it back a little bit and add a little bit more color continuity with the rest of the magenta in the painting. It took a little bit of back and forth between the almost white and the magenta glazes of the flowing water to get it just right. Now it's time to add a little bit of the nickel azo yellow glaze over some of the areas just to warm things up and to make the greens look a little more natural. When adding areas of glazing, I have a moist cloth in my hand so I can wipe back some of the glaze if I add too much. I decided to move the little flow of water near the middle top to the right a little further and to brighten up the rock, so I re-added magenta on top of titanium white and redid those rocks. Well, this painting is just about done and it's been a lot of fun. I hope that you gained some insights from watching this demonstration, and why don't you give it a try? Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe for notice of new videos. Take care.